Hello Java folks, this is a short video to introduce the idea of command line arguments, a technique that allows the outside world to communicate to the program that you might be running. A common use for this technique is to provide some parameters that would dictate how a program behaves. We'll get to that in a second. Again, one of the most common uses is to pass in a parameter that's a file name. But for the moment, let's just consider the main method that we've been dealing with for a long time at this point, and this mysterious string args set of parameters that comes into the main function. You'll all recall that when a main method starts up, it is a main entry point, so it's what you would type in when you would be running a Java program. Type in rather, but on starting to run a program, all the action begins in main. Subsequently, may jump to other methods, print lines and equals and so forth. But for the moment, let's just consider a simple main and actually make use of that args array. It is an array that Java's runtime system will populate with the different arguments that are coming in at the command line. So you'll notice here a very simple program called command args. You can compile it, and I'm using Dr. Java here to do so. So I'll just punch the compile button up here. And if I run this as is, you'll see the run command args. It doesn't do anything right now. If we examine the behavior of what's going on in here, you'll notice first there's a check for args length greater than or equal to 4. So whatever this args array is, the first check is whether or not it's bigger than or equal to 4 in length. If that were the case, then we'd subsequently go through and check each of the command line arguments that would come in for the exact sequence. Here are 4 args. Each of them will come in as strings as indicated by the type of args. Now, to get a slightly different behavior, I'm going to run args down here again by recalling the history and actually type some stuff in. I'll type exactly what shows up on those set of parameters that are being looking for. Here are 4 args. Forgive the syntax highlighting, as Dr. Java thinks that 4 there looks kind of like a number. It'll interpret it. But this run is going to pass these 4 arguments into the running command args program through the args array. So I'll press enter to run it again, and I'll see a array that comes out. Now it's fun to play around with this sort of stuff. For example, if I didn't have exactly 4 args, or one of them was slightly off on that front, I could print out a separate message over here. I'll say system.out.println incorrect command line arguments. Save that. I'm going to recompile it. Now if I press the run button again, Dr. Java, what I'll get is a default run which passes in no command line arguments. And you notice down here, now I'm getting a little error message about an incorrect command line arguments. I'll recall my history where I actually typed this in and run it again to see my array. This time if I change any of these, for instance, args to here are 4 apples instead. I'll also get this little error message on account of I handed it 4 things, so I'll make it inside of this first statement of the condition on if. But then on checking, the here is right, the r is right, the 4 is right, but the args is not, because apples and args are not equal in string land. Will find me down here in the consequence, the other part of the else. I'm going to push this to the side just for a second and call up command shell over here in my alternative editor. Let's see if I can find the shell. Just positioned right here. You recall on the command line, if I java c this command args.java, I'm going to reduce the font, the prompt size a little bit here. I'm going to look around here. There's that command args.class indicating that I've actually compiled this thing. And remember, on the command line, to run a Java program, it's Java, and then the program or the class that has the main function in it that you want to run. In this case, command args. I'll run this thing, and I'll get that same message as I had before, this incorrect command line arguments. If I plop in here, here are 4 args, then I should get that array, the apples bit, or grapes somewhere in here, or if I give it potentially to, let's see, actually this is actually a good experiment. Here are 4 args and more. you'll notice the structure of this condition is checking whether or not the array that's handed in, which is 6 long in this case, is sufficient to make it through this, and the first 4 are correct, so I should see my hooray message down here. So either in a canned environment like Dr. Java provides as an interactions pane, or in an arbitrary Unix shell or Windows command line shell or a Mac terminal, you can pass in information to programs from the outside world that will dictate how they behave. And here, in this case, we got just a very simple change of behavior between printing one thing or printing another thing based on an exact sequence of arguments. Now, that's not usually how command line arguments are used, so let's consider another example. Make Dr. Java just a little bit bigger here again, and we'll have a look at, let's see, we'll have a look at some file. I think that's a good example here. The main intent of this program is to read in a bunch of stuff from a file that are ostensibly numbers, and then sum those all together. We've done some in-class activities to that extent of using a scanner for it. But in that case, the file name that was used was always either a fixed parameter or something we had to open up a second scanner and read from the user. So we'd be accustomed here to seeing something like a numbers.txt plopped in. Now, the change that we're going to make here is that instead of getting this from some fixed string that's determined at compile time, or from reading it from the user by the user prompting and then typing in, instead, this will be a command line argument that's passed in when the program is started. So I'm going to compile this thing. And then I need to make sure that there's a text file in here that I can actually read. Let me open up and stop filtering on just Java files, but look at, for instance, this data1.txt that just has a bunch of numbers in it. They all appear to be readable as floating point numbers, and in my little loop here, I'm asking for next double using the scanner that's going to open up the file. So I think we should be in good shape here. Let me try and run this thing. I'll do a Java, and then this is some file, and then that's called data1.txt. It's in the same directory, so I don't need to do anything special on that account. I'll run this thing, and you can see there was a short delay while the file is read, but here the result is adding all those numbers together and getting me a 76. I made it through this loop, no output in there, but the only output occurs here at the end when I'm actually done reading things in and summing them up, and I'll get the sort of the sum of those. So I can run this again, but without needing to recompile or prompting the user for anything else. Here I'll just change the name of the file that's passed in the command line. Now, it's the runtime system responsibility to take this string data2.txt, plop it into this args array so that main is set up to run successfully and can be used to grab that out of the args array and then used to dictate the behavior of the program. Down here, we'll give another run, and I see a different number here on account of this data2.txt, which I'll need to unfilter again here. Plop over here, has a different set of numbers in it than was present in data1. So where we're at right now is the ability to pass some information into the program, but this is not without some potential errors associated with it. For example, if I forgot this, as in ran some file without any arguments given in, I'll get a nasty little exception here, an array index out of bounds exception. This is guiding me directly to a line number here in my sumfile.java line 6, and that's this one. What's going wrong in this case is the user, me in this case, forgot to pass in a file name as part of the initial startup for the program. The Java runtime system doesn't know anything special about this program. It just populates this array with nothing, so it has a length of 0. And that means an args 0 here will be out of bounds. So a safe thing to do at the startup of many programs is, if you expect command line arguments, do a check. So here I'll ask if args.length is greater than or equal to 1, so that I know there's at least one thing in that array. Sorry, I'll check this for less than 1, because the way I'll orient this is then to print an error message, print line, and oftentimes what's used here is printed here is a usage message, as in you're improperly using this program via Java some file, and then here I'll indicate some file name. Convention in Unix land is often to put little angle brackets around this to indicate it is a required argument to running the program. And rather than proceed at this point, I'm simply going to return because I've got no file to work on here since one was not passed in at the startup of the program. In that respect, then, program's done. In the event that folks pass me something that's at least 1 or bigger, then I'll be able to grab the 0th thing out and open up a scanner on that, go through and print out the results of summing all the numbers in there. So let me recompile this quick. Let's see. I've got a little warning here about I can't compile text files. That's not a big concern. I'm going to plop back up here. I should check to see, make sure, okay, this still runs fine when I actually pass in a command line argument, which is file name. But if I run it without specifying that, then I'll get a usage message here about, okay, you actually need to give me a file. And this is a clue to whatever user is of this program that they're not running the program right. They may want to consult documentation or just have a go at summing some stuff in here or putting a file name in here. That's an important thing to keep in mind, that if you're writing a main method and you expect it to have command line arguments, pressing Dr. Java's run button by default will run it with no arguments. So right here all I'm getting is that usage message that I plopped in. Whereas if I were to comment this check on that out, save, recompile, ignore the errors or the warnings about not being able to compile that stuff, and rerun, I'll get an exception right off the bat. The trace is a little bit longer because we're having Dr. Java's GUI system start this up, but you can see that the source and the top sort of things here are identical, and that at this point the error has moved to line 10. That's where I'm accessing the 0th element of a length 0 array that's out of bounds. So basically I got that same behavior. So in a lot of cases it's a good idea to have checks like this, though tedious. Will save you some explanation later on to users that might want to make use of your command line arguments. That's all for now. Enjoy the coding and the newfound capability to pass information into your program from the outside world using command line arguments.